I think some people think the more they can talk about it, the better it is, the more interesting it is. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that sentiment.
Up that shoot. I gotta be a fly on the wall, which is pretty cool. Can you tell everybody how were the photos?
I think they're pretty good. I like them. There was one section that didn't come out great, but that's okay. That's the good thing about photos, is you can take very many. And the ones that were good were good. And I'm gonna get the film back in a couple days. And I'm waiting on the film photos with bated breath. I always like the film photos more than the digital photos.
So we won't go too far into the film versus digital debate, but you were shooting film and digital photos at the same time. Can you share why you bring out those two different cameras to do a shoot?
Sure, yeah. So I use both of those cameras in slightly different ways. The film camera is a much bigger negative and makes a much bigger image, and I personally just like those. I like the aspect ratio better. It's 6:7, and especially because the negative is so big, I can get so much more information and so much more detail in the negative that translates into photos in a sort of hard to explain way with words. Like, that's why it's an image, right? So that's the job, so to speak, that the medium format camera does, the film camera. And then the digital camera is, if I don't know how light's gonna look, or if I want to change the settings a little, I can do that a lot more confidently on the digital camera, because I can just test it, change it, fix it, and then know for sure how it's gonna look. But it's kind of like the digital camera gives me a lot of chances to make a rough draft, and then the medium format camera, I can make like the most perfect version of the photo.
So regardless of the camera you use, one thing I've always enjoyed about your photos is that you don't really do much in post. So why this minimal approach to editing with your photos?
Why?
Yeah.
I have a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is because I don't like editing. Editing is not fun. Like, taking the photos is fun, and meeting the people and going to the places is the fun, is the fun part. And the editing is like the chore for me. Also, the longer answer is because I feel like the more I edit, the more I deviate from what I made. And I know that might sound silly. It's like, yeah, but you're still making it, right? It's just like the next step. And that's true, but it's just, I don't want to get too far removed from what I was trying to make at the time of me making it directly. I think that if you're relying on editing, on post, to make your photos better, then that's a symptom of something a little more harrowing. I don't know if that's the right word. Like, you have a bigger problem. So if you have to edit to get the photo much better consistently, then maybe something else is going on that requires reflection of some kind. I think editing is like the icing or the sauce. It's like, this is good, and I'm just gonna, a little brighter, a little darker, a little grayer, whatever, some combination of those things, and now it's done. And I think that the more, in my opinion, in my experience, the more editing I always did, the more, like I said a minute ago, the farther it got from what I had originally made. I met this photographer like a few months ago, recently, and we were just chit-chatting, and this person was telling me all the steps, every single step of the editing process, and it was like, it made me think like that person wasn't even describing photography anymore. It was like they just like to edit photos, which is cool, which is fine. Like, it's not my business, but they were just describing something else to me at that point. And I don't think having this talking point of I do this and I do this and I bend over backwards and I bring it around town and da-da-da, and then I get the photo, I don't think that makes the photo any better.
Oh no, you look great. Oh, good.
Right. Create that photo. What are the considerations that you give before making a photo, knowing that you're not going to touch it much?
Right. That's a good question. We've talked about this before. So when knowing that I'm going to have a pretty slim editing process or post, process, rolling into a photo, I always, like, I've said this before, like the eye has to travel, right? And that, to me, the greatest lesson I've learned about that concept is front to back, especially to the foreground to the background of the image. So a photograph here's the buzz, is two-dimensional representation of space, of 3D space. And you can engage, and a lot of people, I think, especially beginners, like, kind of forget that, or they underestimate the gravity of that. And I know that if I can make axes and get you to consciously or unconsciously engage as a viewer with that dimension of space, like the difference between this and the difference between this, right? Even unconsciously is much more interesting, a lot more dynamic, I think, and it adds to the depth, to the acknowledgement, to the third dimension that is important and needs to, for me, in my school or in my train of thought, needs to be included and acknowledged in successful photographs.
This film is from 2007. You can see that. It's almost 20 years old. So it's going to be a little funky. You can smell it. Oh yeah, it stinks.
Okay, then to close out, what advice would you give somebody who wants to take their photography, portraits in particular, kind of in a more naturalistic way?
The best advice I think I could give to someone trying to take better portraits or pictures of people especially is to learn about your own body. Or it's like practice with your own body. So when I was a kid, I don't want to sound weird, I would stand in the mirror for hours and hours and just like, what's the difference between this and this, and this and this. And I'm not saying that anyone should go stand in the mirror for hours and hours, but I am saying that understanding like how a body moves, or how, if I move my shoulders, how's that going to affect how my legs look, or or if I move my chin, how's that going to make my forehead look? Understanding that is important. More generally, for people who want to take pictures of faces and people especially, I don't want to say too much, but I give the same instructions or similar instructions in different situations and different shoots all the time. And I don't mean this in a greedy way or a vain way, but the photos I always like them. I always think they look good. And other people seem to like them too. Like I think they're successful, generally, sound, And I'm not here reinventing the wheel, It's just like, oh, please rotate your shoulders, like please rotate your hips, and it's that simple. for me, at least in the way I see it. Yeah.
It's perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.